Well, I tell you, Baz, every now and then you get in one of your favourites. One of your favourites. They don't know they were one of your favourites. So I was fortunate enough to bump into this bloke a few times across the journey in sport, and I always thought he was just a ripping bloke, and he became one of my favourite players. We're talking about Glenn Manton. Thanks for coming in, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Now,
Both of you.
It's really difficult to
He
know.
didn't say anything. Did you notice that? He said nothing.
Nothing.
You said,
Because he
I was
doesn't
your
know you
favourite.
yet?
He said nothing.
Got anything for Mance, mate?
Nothing at all. No, not after that. Not after
Well,
that.
let's go. Well, hang on
big
then.
rant.
Let's do this.
wasn't
True
good.
story, and he knows that. I've not hidden that when we've had a chance to chat. You made a good point when he first came on. Glenn was the first bloke to show ink.
That I can remember.
Now you see it everywhere. NBA, AFL, all got it, mate. You're a bit of a trendsetter. Did you know at the
in
time
the city
you were?
Melbourne? What would you think coming out of Collingwood, North Melbourne, West Melbourne? This is the high class look. Let me tell you. And I just brought it into Carlton, and away we went. But no, look, it's just an appreciation of one's self-adornment, and I was possibly ahead of the curve.
Well, I think you're miles ahead because I did say it when you first walked up that you're the only one I can remember that actually displayed the ink when you were playing. And you think, oh, wow, that guy, oh, look at those tats, look at the tats there. But you wouldn't, I don't think there would have been another player in your team at the time that would have had them.
No, there weren't too many guys. A couple of guys would have had, the sneaky one on the butt cheek, that sort of thing, the mistake that they made over the course of time. But not only was it the tattoos, but it was also the piercings. I think the piercings were more famous than the tattoos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you got any piercings?
No.
No. Surprising. I thought you might have had both nipples done. Something like that.
This afternoon.
This afternoon.
Before we get down to your books, and let's move past your tattoo. 178 games in the VFL then, premiership with Carlton, of course, and started with Essendon. So it's been a really good footy journey for
Absolutely.
you. Are there some moments where you look back, because we had a chance to reflect on our careers and go, gee, it was just a great moment? A quiet time on your own?
I can tell you this quite sincerely. When my career ended, I fossicked through probably about 30 or 40 VHS tapes, and I wanted to see one mark that I took. And I managed to find this particular mark taken over in Perth. I watched it 3 times and I never looked back. I never went back again. I was just disinterested. It's in the past. Whatever thing that I've done yesterday is in the past. And my football career is a reflection of what I was doing then, not what I'm doing now.
Does it help you with now, though? Does it break down some barriers because you've got a little bit of that about you?
Look, AFL football opens doors, there's no doubt about that, and there's a great alumni and there's a great interest in the sport. But I think building real relationships and being able to communicate clearly with people and have fun with your communication and so forth is more valuable than anything you might have done on a football field. In fact, when I left AFL football, I went and played soccer for the South Melbourne Hellas before soccer disbanded in this country, and then I went to Germany for 2 years and raced a bobsled for Australia ahead of the Olympics in 2006. And those two experiences I would put on an equal footing. How many people have raced a bobsled for Australia?
Well, so 2005, 2006, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Am I right with the bobsledding? Yeah. What drew you to it?
Opportunity, risk, chance, something to step out of sight of one's comfort zone. When I first got into a bobsled, I can tell you without a word of a lie, it was the first time I'd ever seen snow. So I'm hurtling down a mountain in Austria in the back of a bobsled, first time snow falling upon me, thinking this is fantastic.
Wow,
I don't know. Have you ever seen the skit on Red Faces where the guys come out and do the bobsled?
I have seen that.
I don't know why I'm thinking of you and putting
Well,
that
it's very,
together,
very similar. That's how we train, just the Australian bobsled team. Our backdrop here is, of course, fake, but a very real reflection of what it's like in Australia. We don't have that sort of facility.
So how scary is that, though?
To be quite honest, the first time down the mountain, you have no idea what to expect. Yeah. So it's just a free-for-all. It's a free run. It's an opportunity to experience. It's the second, the third, the fourth run when you realise that this is an incredibly dangerous sport. You're pulling more G-force than an F111. You're travelling at 130, 140 kilometres an hour. That's when you start to say to yourself, you know what, if there is someone up there, maybe just take a little bit of a look at me today, if you wouldn't mind.
Attention. Mate, you've been really diverse over your career. You're into books, mate. I wrote these down because they're just great names.
Please.
Deadbolt, Mongrel Punts, Hardball Gets, Tattoo Yourself, Authentic, and of course the latest one, mate, Put your damn phone
plug here.
down. So let's give it a plug. Put your damn phone down. What's it about?
50 really provocative questions. So if we open it to any Paige, there's one for you there. I don't know if we've got the shot to camera there. Is there ever justification for war? So there's the question, there's the breakout. I'm not sure if you're aware of that particular photo of the napalm girl that came out of the Vietnamese War. This is an opportunity to build relationships, stir conversation, research, find balance, and reconnect with oneself. In amongst those 50 provocative questions are stories from my life, and there's one just here around music, around loss, around grieving. There's stories in there. If we flick forward, there's another story just here, if I can be awkward about it, called the Kookaburra, which is about the day in which I met my mentor, Alec Epps, at the 1993 Grand Final. You would remember Alec Epps?
I remember Alec Epps very well, but that is a fascinating story. I had a read of that, because very rarely do you get a player who is left out of a Grand Final tell his story. Very rarely do you get that person say, I didn't feel like I wanted my team to win. I didn't feel like I wanted the opposition to win. You know, that's someone, you rarely hear that. The guy, okay, everyone's sad for him because he got left out of the final, but you come out here and talk about it as if you didn't really care. You cared, but you didn't want your team to win because there's nothing in it for you.
Well, I'm a petulant 20-year-old sitting in an AFL Grand Final having strained my hamstring. Did I get picked or not picked? Who knows?
Yeah.
But the point is, I'm not picked on that particular day. I'm thinking it's the worst day of my life. As you do, you become very insular, very self-absorbed. Out of nowhere, this big, thick hand falls on my shoulder. This old guy, someone over the age of 30, looks at me and says...
Really old.
Incredibly old. Yeah. Says to me, I think you're a really good footballer. And my chest swelled for the first time on that particular day. I went to say something in return. He said to me, but you're not that expletive good. I couldn't believe it. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. He then takes out a pen, piece of paper, hands me the pen and piece of paper and says, call me if you want to be a better footballer and a better person.
Yeah, Alec Epps.
Alec Epps. My whole life changes. I end up meeting him, Phil, every Wednesday morning from that next Wednesday. Say AFL Grand Final Saturday, the next Wednesday, I meet him every Wednesday morning for the next 9 years at the bottom of Park Street, Moonee Ponds, Clarinda Reserve. And we train one-on-one for 9 years.
But not
never
after
missed
that
a day.
first one. Not after that first one. The first one, you didn't want to see him again.
You're right.
You never
You're
wanted to see
absolutely
him
right.
again. He nearly killed you.
He did. Well, you're absolutely right. So the first time I met him in the park, I was 15 minutes late.
Yeah.
He told me to be there at 7. I was 15 minutes late. I had no idea. I walked into the park, into that surrounding space with swag. Swag hadn't been invented at that stage. I walked in with swag, and this old Italian man accosted me. He berated me. He took every curse word known to mankind, put it into one succinct sentence, and he said, if you're ever late again, never ever come back. And you're right. I went back to my car. I locked the doors in case he was following me. I drove home and I said, I'm never spending another second with anyone who calls himself the Kookaburra. 9 years later.
So why'd you go back? Can you remember?
Absolutely. I realised that there was nothing in it for him. He asked for nothing from me other than my attendance and the ability to listen. He showed me genuine care and love, interest, and he knew what he was talking about. He had drills, skills, ideas that I'd never even thought of, and I can tell you in front of them, I'll never forget this. You asked about my AFL career, things that really stand out. In front of the members' stand against Collingwood, I remember picking a ball up off the ground and looking up and expecting him to be there 3 metres away. It was just like a drill. I remember looking up, I almost handballed it to no one because I expected him to be there. And that was the repetition and the effort and the time that he invested in me.
Yeah. The other thing about that story was that when you got home and you spoke to Dad about the incident and you mentioned the Kookaburra, and he said you met the Kookaburra. So you didn't know that Dad knew the Kookaburra.
I had no idea.
And
no idea. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I spoke to my dad about it. Should we call? How should I go about that? My dad's promoting it. Call. I asked my mum, because you can't make any decision without talking to your mother, of course. I said, Mum, should I call this man the Kookaburra? She didn't even look back at me. She just kept stirring soup on the stove and simply said, only call him if he has patience. So mother knows best.
Mate, I want to ask you about White Line.
Please.
The organisation you've had going for 15 years now. Tell us a little bit about it.
White Line is an organisation which reflects a lot of the energy between myself and Alec Epps. It's an organisation that bases itself with the most disconnected, disenfranchised youth in the country. So more often than not, young people who have been in jail or had some sort of influence from the juvenile justice system, that centre, that space. And it started on the back of me being asked to come in and do some one-on-one sessions with young men and young women, young prisoners, if you will. And from there, I realised that no one was investing in these young people. So it sounds like a pretty easy get in terms of a mental understanding, but obviously we keep missing the boat. Young person goes to prison, no time invested, circle, bang, back into prison again. So trying to break that cycle, break that circular motion and help them diversify their life with mentoring, job opportunities, life opportunities that grow them as people.
Have you got any that stuck with you? I mean, I've worked with a couple of kids that could have gone to jail and certainly would have ended up drugs and dead, that are now teaching at schools, and you watch them. And for me, I think it was nearly the greatest reward when you talk about all these sporting achievements. You go, yeah, they're great, but I'm telling you, this one resonates the most with me. This kid, Kun, just love him. You know, he lives in Sydney, and we speak once or twice a year. A couple for you. Is there one or two that just?
I worked for a number of years with a young woman called Michelle, who was a heroin addict, and there's another great story in this book about that particular relationship. That did not end well, but the investment is similar to what you're talking about, the pride, the happiness that was derived from seeing this person at least have an opportunity to do some different things with their life. Is a great pleasure and quite a privilege, really. You would know, Phil, just as well as anyone, that you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink.
Glenn Manton, our pupil guest. You need to put your damn phone down. It is a ripping book. And I tell you, if you want to have a great guest speaker come to your organisation, you need to get in touch with this man. Stay with us. A bit more to come.